You'd have to be living under a rock to not know about QUARTZSITE, the Arizona city that gets overrun by nomads and snowbirds each winter. But are the stories you see on YouTube true? Is hanging out in QUARTZSITE really like getting the enema deal of the century? Or is there more to this desert city than meets the eye? Stay tuned as we jump in to discover all there is to see beyond just what the infamous RVers of QUARTZSITE, Arizona show you.
Hey sightseers, Sightseeing Sally here. I'm with
Marty.
And as you can see, we've made it as far as
Arizona to QUARTZSITE,
one of Marty's favorite desert towns. And over the next few days, we're going to take you around QUARTZSITE and show you sites that aren't limited to RVs.
Or like I say, what's the hype with QUARTZSITE?
Yeah, there's more here to QUARTZSITE than RVs, and you'll soon find that out here in this video. With all the videos on YouTube highlighting QUARTZSITE as a place for dirty van dwellers, nomads, RVers, and snowbirds, it's easy to dismiss QUARTZSITE as being an overrated, overrun desert town. Yet, as we found, there are a number of hidden gems here. Historical points of interest, and places in and around QUARTZSITE you wouldn't necessarily find anywhere else. For instance, tucked behind the La Paz County Justice Court building, you'll find a neat little walking trail that leads to an utterly magical and historic place, the site of an ironwood tree that's over 1,000 years old. Talk about old. Wow, that's old. And something I learned about ironwood trees that I didn't know before that I found totally fascinating. Well, one, they are protected, and that's not the fascinating part. But two, I learned that when you burn them, they give off cyanide. Yikes! That's one tree I certainly wouldn't want to mess with. I don't know about you sightseers, but my interest is piqued. Why don't we take a stroll down the little path and see if we can find this great old tree of Arizona. Check this out. They even have a bench for you to sit on. Kick up your feet, relax a bit, listen to the sounds of nature, enjoy the shade from this 1,000-year-old tree, and you can even get a free concert if it happens to be Buck Connors days. If you're wondering who Buck Connors was, I'll get to him in a moment. First, I want to point out that right off over there is where we went in to find that secret little space with the 1,000-year-old ironwood tree. And then over here, you're going to find this nice park where you'll find these two old U.S. Air Force fighter jets. Known as the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantoms, these aircraft served as a primary fighter with the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps during the Vietnam era. They carried a crew of 2, a pilot and a weapons systems officer, and could easily reach speeds in excess of Mach 2, 1,400 plus miles an hour. Can you imagine that, going 1,400 plus miles an hour? That just blows my mind. That's just mind-boggling.
That's roughly what, 20 times faster than you travel on the interstate? That's moving.
Only 20 times?
70 miles an hour times 20 is 1,400.
Yeah, that's moving.
You can kind of tell that these probably came from an aircraft carrier, or they did come from one, because you can see the hook on the back of it yet. See that round circle with the yellow in it? It's a big hook that comes down and hooks cables on aircraft carriers because they can't land in a couple hundred feet, so they use a cable to stop them. If you look at that one over there, you can definitely see it at the back of the tail there, underneath the hook that comes down.
If I'm not mistaken, they have these here in a memorial tribute towards somebody who is connected here to Quartzsite that also served in the military during, I think, if I read correctly, General Patton's time, and served as an advisor to the Republic of South Vietnam Army. That was Arlo J. Markstad, and all in all, he served nearly 31 years from December of 1942 to August of 1973. Next up, we're going to head over to the cemetery and show you two famous graves over there. One of them being on the National Register of Historic Places as a monument, and the other one being the gravesite of Buck Connors. Not to be confused with Chuck Connors, the actor that played in The Rifleman, but Buck Connors, a different sort of character, and an actor whose spirit is kept alive through the annual Town of Quartzsite Buck Connors Western Days. If I'm not mistaken, this is a picture of old Buck himself. And if it's not, somebody will correct me down in the comments section. I just know it. Anyways, let's get over to the cemetery and check out those graves. Holy man, I'm already out of breath. I didn't realize how far it was from the truck. We're now over at the High Jolly Cemetery. Yes, High Jolly is so famous that they named the cemetery after him. Now, if you want to know the story of High Jolly, you can check out an old video of mine. We came out here and I filmed an entire video just talking about the High Jolly Monument. And as interesting of a story as that is, in reality today, I wanted to show you the grave of Buck Connors because I don't think he gets quite the same amount of attention as High Jolly gets. But I could be wrong. It took us a little while to find his gravesite, but he is buried over here in this area on the edge of the cemetery, along with his son, George W. Connor II, who passed away when he was just a little boy. From what I understand, Buck Connors lived a very colorful and interesting life. In fact, his life story is so interesting, I could probably do an entire video on it, and maybe someday I will. But I just want to leave you with the fact that Buck Connors was known to have starred in over 80 films between the years of like 1912 and 1941. Not to mention, he also appeared in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show for a time or two. One of the reasons why I think so many people like coming out to Quartzsite, aside from the fact that you can stay for relatively cheap on BLM land, is the fact that you don't have to go very far before you can find some of the best views around. This particular spot is known as Q Mountain, and it gets its name from the Q that can be seen for miles around. Years ago, I hiked up there. Don't think I'm going to attempt that today. In fact, a little bit later on, we're going to hook up with one of the locals, a historian. He has a Jeep. He's going to take us around to some of the sites, including the top of Q Mountain. That way you can see some of the things that aren't as easily accessible by our mode of transportation. Not surprisingly, one of the things that attracts people to Quartzsite these days are the tales from the Old West about the gold rush and the old gold mines that are still here. The lure of gold is so great that there are those to this day who still spend hours toiling out here in the desert, searching for that ever-elusive mineral.
There still are claims around here, quite a few of them from what I can see. And unfortunately at night you have people who will sneak onto your claim and metal detect and dig for gold. Well, Allegedly they do.
Aren't those people called claim jumpers?
Yep, that's the technical term for them. I call them thieves, but...
Either way, it means the same thing, right?
Yeah, and out here you might get the old West Justice, a rope, or be looking down a shotgun.
Yeah. Let's put it on record that Sally and Marty are not into that. Okay? Can we just put that out there?
Yep, not interested in stealing gold.
No, we're just interested in the stories. We're now over at the site of one of several geoglyphs that can be found in the area. This one in particular shows an arrow along with several other symbols that can be seen. Here, I'll put up on the screen for you a map of what the symbols are so you can see for yourself what we're looking at. By the way, look at how dark and moody the skies are over the mountains today. Such a beautiful sight out here, even if it is a wee bit chilly in the wind. Speaking of views, you want to talk about a view? Check this out, sightseers. The view from up here is just amazing, and as you can probably tell, it's really super windy right now. Wow, the wind's just pushing the camera against me. But look at that, you can see all the roads and the vehicles and just the whole area around QUARTZSITE.
Next up, visiting some of the historic sites that can be found in the desert around QUARTZSITE.
And then they'd separate it with water.
Stamp mill.
Yes, it's a stamping mill.
Here's something you don't see too often in the desert. Purple flowers. You can see Marty making his way into the cave. Apparently you'll find petroglyphs out here along the face of the rock. Up by the cave there were some, but they're so faded you couldn't really see it. Here you can see some of them right up here. Let me zoom in. There you go. That's a better look at it. What they mean, I don't know. But they're pretty fascinating to look at. See, some up along there. You've got what looks like a cross right there. You can see it's really green out here. Flowers popping everywhere. Not something that you usually see here. I guess this year it's extra green because of all the rain they got. This area is what's known as the kitchen, where you'll find the grinding holes that the Native Americans used. Basically, from what I understand, they took like bean pods, we'll call them, off this tree here and then ground them in these holes. At least that's what I was told by our guide. Another point of interest is the Joseph Kone house. The second of 2 stone houses that he built. You can see the fabulous view he had living out here in the desert. Then of course there are the mines that QUARTZSITE is known for. I believe this one's called the Crystal Mine. You probably can't see it, but this here is very steep and goes down in that way. And then of course it goes back that way. And then the quartz vein goes up this way. Once gold fever struck this area, it never left. During the 1860s, 1 out of every 4 persons in the territory of Arizona was either a prospector or a miner. Between 1932 and 1933, over 100 men attempted to make their living by mining in the QUARTZSITE hills. Even today, prospecting opportunities are said to be excellent, which is why you'll find so many still toiling their time away in the hot desert sun looking for gold near these old mines.
I'm going to just put this out there right now and say old-timers are probably going to remember a little bit different QUARTZSITE than what is here today. Times have changed, and you're going to see different industries here than you would have, say, 20 years ago. There's probably more empty lots and RV parks here too. Yet, if you look real close, you can still spy a few of the old historic buildings. Some of them here on the main street date back to the 1870s and 1880s, like the Tysons Stage Station Museum. Back before Quartzsite was known as Quartzsite, it was known as Tysons Well. Tyson being the last name of the man who came here, dug a well, erected this building, which then became one of the stagecoach stops between Ehrenberg and Wickenburg and points east. He also put up the Oasis Hotel. Here you can see a replica of the building's walls of the sleeping quarters. If you look closely through the doorway, you can see some of the original walls to the building. Due to its age, being made out of adobe, and having fallen into disrepair, it is as you see there. Moving on, I just want to mention one more thing about the Tysons Well Museum. If you're into history, you'll definitely want to make this a stop. They're open Wednesday through Sunday from 10 to 4, and they have docents on site who are available to answer your questions, take you on a little tour of the museum if you wish, share stories of some of Quartzsite's most colorful residents. It's a fun stop. Free. Yep, no admission fees here. They rely on donations and grants and sales of some of their merchandise to help them get by. So, definitely want to come check it out if you get to Quartzsite. Besides, when you're done at the museum, you can head next door by Celias, grab yourself a pizza, and then top it off with ice cream dessert at Dorothy and Toto's. Did somebody say ice cream? Are we going to get ice cream by Dorothy and Toto's?
We're having cucumbers instead. Want a bite?
Well, if that isn't the lamest type of dessert, I don't know what is.
That's pretty much what you only allow me now.
I plead the fifth. If you're familiar with Quartzsite, you know then that this is an iconic Quartzsite stop. Because this is where you could come and meet Paul Weiner, the naked bookstore guy. Or almost naked, he did keep his bits covered. Unfortunately, after over 3 decades of being a larger-than-life Quartzsite legend, Paul Weiner passed away at the age of 75. It doesn't look like we'll be able to go on inside today. It's looking pretty deserted. I had heard from one of the locals that his widow was still running the bookstore. I was hoping we'd be able to go on inside, but as you can see, that's not going to happen. And in fact, there's a sign out front indicating that this iconic bookstore is for sale. An indication that although change is inevitable, it doesn't always come easy. Well, moving on, there are some other sites I still want to show you around here in Quartzsite, like the old Camel Stop gas station. Believed to have been built in 1927, the Camel Stop is Quartzsite's first gas station. And then next door to that is Quartzsite's original post office. Now home to Cal's Custom Creations. Inside you'll find all kinds of neat creations, from jewelry to funny signs, magnets, and etched glassware. He even does customized work, so you'll definitely want to give Cal a stop.
Speaking of stops, our next stop involves a trip to jail. The old Quartzsite jail, that is.
Looking at the construction of the jail, Marty has some thoughts on that.
Looking at it, they probably poured this over how many days? It's like one width a day they probably poured and let it harden. But if you look down here, you can tell it's reinforced. You can see a steel bar in there or some metal. So even if they tried to break through the concrete, they still run into metal that would stop them.
Personally, I really like that they added the metal art sculptures to the jail. I think it kind of brings a certain ambiance or sets the tone for what it may have been like here at the jail. And if you use your imagination, you can create a whole backstory as to how this guy here ended up in chains and what the sheriff over here had to do to bring him into custody. By the way, this is the original QUARTZSITE jail, and it can be found in the back lot of Solar Bill's RV Solar. Just make sure you go on inside and check with them before accessing it.
Actually built sometime around 1938, this jail replaced a wooden jail that had been built in 1894.
What started out as a memorial spot for one has expanded into something much greater. This is Celias Rainbow Gardens. Celia being the daughter of Paul and Joanne Weiner. The same Paul Weiner from the bookstore. Apparently him and his wife Joanne had a daughter, Celia was her name, who died at the young age of 8. As a result, they developed this garden here in her memory. Well, this garden has expanded from being a memorial for just their daughter to a memorial for all kinds of people from all over. It's incredible when you think about it, how this one garden just expanded into something so much greater than what it was originally intended for. There are memorials here for people from all over. And the memorials are just as diverse as the people who are being honored here. Some of the tributes are simple, whereas others are more elaborate. This one here is pretty interesting to look at. It's typical desert rock art. You've got a hat up in this corner, a guitar over here, and then a cowboy boot over there. For some reason, I'm getting the vibe that this may be a tribute to Paul Weiner himself. From what I recall, he was a musician and he wore a hat that looked very similar to the one that's pictured there. And then of course you got the cowboy boot. But don't quote me on that. It's just a feeling that I'm getting. I don't have any facts to back that up, nor is there a sign indicating as such. You can tell by looking at it that it's that special kind of place where you can come, sit, and contemplate those who have gone before us. Definitely worth a look if you want to get away from the hustle and bustle of the busy main drag.